Now that we know about correct sentence structure, we can talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that students usually make with sentences. So the first type of sentence structure mistake we'll talk about is run-on sentences. And I like this picture. I think it really fits how students feel sometimes with grammar and with sentence structure. The more I think, the more confused I get. So try to keep in mind that the rules for sentence structure are pretty simple. So if you just try to keep things simple and don't try to get too complicated, you won't have problems with sentence structure. Okay, so the two problems, a run-on sentence, which is two or more sentences joined incorrectly. And sometimes it's just with a comma. We call that specifically a comma splice. And then the other type of sentence structure mistake is a fragment. It's an incomplete sentence. So think about if it's a run-on, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. And if it's a fragment, it's just pieces of a sentence. It's incomplete. Let's talk more specifically about run-on sentences. Two complete thoughts or two independent clauses with no punctuation to connect the two words together. So here we've got a couple of examples. Kate handed back the quizzes. The students looked disappointed. I've got two independent clauses. Kate handed back the quizzes. The students looked disappointed. Each has a subject and a verb. Subject Kate, verb handed. Subject students, verb looked. But there's nothing connecting them together. No connecting words, no punctuation. Same thing with the second example. One student stood up, then she walked out of the classroom. In this case, I have a connecting word, then, but there's no punctuation to connect the two clauses together. A more specific type of run-on sentence is something called a comma splice. What this means is that you have a comma only to connect two independent clauses. No connecting words, just a comma. While this is okay in a lot of languages, this is not okay in English. You cannot connect two sentences together with a comma only. Couple examples. The test arrived at exactly 10, comma. Some students had not yet arrived. So here I've got this only a comma connecting two independent clauses. Test started, subject verb. Students had not yet arrived, subject verb. Same thing with the second example. The students had only 30 minutes to complete their test, comma, the teacher didn't allow additional time. Again, I'm connecting two independent clauses together with only a comma, and that doesn't work. So how do you correct run-on sentences? Well, the easiest way to correct run-on sentences is to think about what you already know about correct sentence structure, that each independent clause has a subject and a verb, and we can connect them together in particular ways. The easiest way to correct a run-on sentence is just to separate it into two simple sentences. Use a period and a capital letter to break the thoughts up. We also talked about how you can use a semicolon to connect two thoughts to a formal compound sentence. You can use connecting words like coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, or transition words with the proper punctuation to connect those two thoughts together. All right, let's look at some examples. We've got an incorrect sentence here. Many of the students got A's and B's on their tests, comma, they felt relieved. So I have a comma splice here because I have many got, and they felt. So I've got two subjects and verbs, two independent clauses, two complete thoughts, and they're connected with only a comma. And you can see there's a number of different ways that I can fix it. I can use a period. Got A's and B's on their test, period, capital, they felt relieved. I could use a semicolon. In the second example there, I could use a connecting word. Many of the students got A's and B's on their tests, comma, so they felt relieved. So here I'm using a coordinating conjunction. I can use a subordinating conjunction because they got A's and B's on their tests, comma, many students felt relieved, or a transition word to create a formal compound sentence. Many of the students got A's and B's on their tests, semicolon, as a result, comma, they felt relieved. Okay, another example. Paying rent can be a problem in this economy. That's why many young people choose to live there with their relatives. So before I show some possible answers, I just want you to take a moment and think about how would you fix this run-on sentence? What would be some ways, some different suggestions that you might have to this student for how to fix this sentence? Okay, hopefully you came up with something interesting. Here's some suggestions. Could start a new sentence. Could use a semicolon. Could use a coordinating conjunction. There was so. I could use a subordinating conjunction, since. I could use a transition word there, with that, therefore. Pay attention though, make sure you're using the correct punctuation with each of these. So here I've got one really long sentence. The disadvantage of multi-generational families is that young people don't know what to do in circumstances where they have to handle a problem. It is not easy for children and parents to handle the problem in their families, and both of them do not have independence of decision. Wow! Take a breath. That's a long sentence. There actually is only one problem in this sentence because we have a number of dependent clauses in this sentence, and dependent clauses can be connected to independent clauses. I can only connect two independent clauses together at one time, but I can connect many dependent clauses. So here, the disadvantage of multi-general families is, so there's one independent clause, and then that young people don't know what to do in circumstances. I've got a noun clause, then another adjective clause where they have to handle a problem. So that's okay to have those two dependent clauses, the noun clause and the adjective clause. They're connected to the first independent clause. The problem comes is when I have another independent clause. It is not easy. And so that I can't have connected without any punctuation. That's why I began a new sentence there to fix the problem. And then in the rest of the clause, for children and parents to handle the problem in their families, and both of them. So there I've got a correctly connected with and the coordinating conjunction there. Okay, I'll show you another example here. I want you to take a minute and count the verbs in this sentence, the complete verbs in this sentence, and then see if they all have subjects. And if they do, we've got some problems because we have we'll need to connect it properly with punctuation, or maybe even separate into two new sentences. So take a minute, count the verbs that you see. And then see if they have subjects. So hopefully you came up with helped, encourage, make, support, and love. So I've got so many verbs: helped, encourage, make, support, love. I've got 5 verbs, but I've only got 2 connecting words, 3 connecting words here. If that's a problem for you, keep it simple. In this case, I've got 2 coordinating conjunctions, but and. That's always a big no-no. That if I've got 2 coordinating conjunctions, that means that I'm connecting 3 independent clauses together, and that's a run-on. I can only have 2 independent clauses in one sentence before I have to begin a new sentence. If this is a problem for you, follow the 2-verb rule. And don't connect more than two verbs together in one sentence. Okay, let's talk about fragments now. So a fragment is basically an incomplete sentence. Something about the sentence is not finished. Take a look at these examples. I like spring because the weather is nice. So that second sentence is incomplete. It's a fragment. When I start with the subordinating conjunction because, that means it's a dependent clause. It has to be connected to an independent clause. So if I took away the period and had a lowercase b in because, I like spring because the weather is nice, that would work. That would be a complex sentence. Look at the second example. Mr. Potter was an excellent teacher, was easy to understand him. The problem is in the second sentence. I've got the verb was, but I have no subject. So I could add a placeholder subject like it was easy to understand him. So how can you correct fragments? Well, one easy way is to join the fragment to the sentence before. Use connecting words, subordinators, or prepositions, or join the sentence to the sentence after using connecting words. So this works really well when you have a dependent clause all alone. Connect it to whatever sentence makes the most sense. And then finally, you can fix fragments by adding a subject and verb or a verb if one is missing. Okay. So here I've got an incorrect sentence. For instance, my cousin Paul, who is 17. One time he watched TV until 4 a.m. Well, that first sentence, my cousin Paul, who is 17. Who is 17 is an adjective clause. So that's a dependent clause. It cannot be a sentence on its own. And then my cousin Paul, that's a phrase. It's missing a verb. So here are a couple of examples of how I could fix this. For instance, my cousin Paul is 17. One time he watched TV until 4 a.m. I could just simply eliminate the adjective clause. Or I could connect the adjective clause to the next sentence. For instance, my cousin Paul, who is 17, watched TV until 4 a.m. A few more examples. One day my sister decided to live a healthy life, so she joined Weight Watchers, and she lost 33 pounds. The problem here is that I've got a sentence that begins with a coordinating conjunction. Coordinating conjunctions, by definition, they have to connect things together, which means if I'm starting a sentence with a coordinating conjunction, that's a fragment sentence. So I need to connect it to something else. The problem is, if I just simply connect it to the previous sentence, I'm creating a run-on sentence. I already have the coordinating conjunction, so I'm already connecting two independent clauses together. If I connected and she lost 30 pounds, I would have three independent clauses together, and that would be a run-on. But I can fix it by removing the subject. I could say one day my sister decided to live a healthy life, so she joined Weight Watchers and lost 33 pounds. Since the subject is the same, she, I could remove that and create a compound verb and avoid the run-on sentence. Or I could just simply take away and create a separate sentence. She lost 33 pounds. Okay, so that should tell you a little bit about how to correct problems with sentence structure. Take a look at some of the practice worksheets with dependent clauses and fragments and run-on sentences.